Hello and welcome to Memorial Day weekend. So, if some of you may have gotten started early, I congratulate you. I hope you're half in the bag right now while you're watching this. And if not, if you're stone cold sober and you have to stay until 5 p.m., I'm here for you too. Not a whole lot going on with the Texans as of this week. Caserio was on Chris Sims' show a couple of days ago. I just first saw that interview this morning. Jonathan Alexander had kind of a quasi update slash synopsis of where the Texans are with potentially finding new headquarters. And then Frank Ross, special teams coach, was on with Mark and John and had some really interesting answers and exchanges, especially. I've got the link to the entire interview below. I didn't include any of the clips from going in deep on some of the special team strategy, but he's always interesting to listen to. So Caserio on Chris Sims' podcast. Chris Sims asked him the dreaded question that we know that Nick Caserio despises. Hey, how do you balance between best player available and drafting for need? We know GMs despise this question. I thought Caserio did a good job with it.
Yeah, you have to just figure out how do we get the best players in the building, regardless of position.
Okay.
Now, if you have potentially an opening or opportunity and you have two players that may be graded on an equal plane, then maybe you lean towards one area or the other. But you don't want to rule anybody out because, quote unquote, what you have in the building or what you have on paper, because as we all know, things change in a hurry. So there may not be a quote unquote need or an opportunity in its current form, but a few months down the road, maybe things have changed or shifted, and you're going to feel like, you know what? Not that you knew that was going to happen, but you've just put yourself in a decent position. And I think you have to understand your team, understand where the contracts, maybe how they're built. But ultimately, the competition is going to sort itself out amongst the players.
And I think we've figured out exactly where Nick stands on all of this. I think sometimes when he bristles at drafting for need, it's because the suggestion of a GM who drafts for need almost demands that it means that he would be overdrafting players. That if you're going specifically for need, you're going to find yourself in a spot midway through the second round where, man, we really need an offensive tackle. And even though these guys are all third and fourth rounders, we're going to take one of them. So nobody's smart enough to continually be smarter than the rest of the NFL teams combined that often. So I think that's what he bristles against. I think it's fair enough that, A, it's a tiebreaker, obviously. If you got two equally graded guys, one's an offensive guard this year and one's a defensive end, you're going to take the guard. But two, it's one of the reasons that Nick trades up and down as much as he does is that they might be in a situation, I think, where, hey, they're sitting there, let's say they're midway through the second round and the best player available is a defensive end. He's going to try to trade into a different group of players. And if he can't, they'll take that guy. If they don't get but they're not going to desperately try to trade out. If a fair trade is available, then maybe you try to get back down into a position of need. And I'm cool with that. It's like the appropriate balance of trying to game the system, but also having some humility about you not knowing everything. Like as he said, anybody that, or in one of these clips here, he says, hey, anybody that thinks that they know every pick's going to work out is lying. No GM actually thinks that. So it's all coming into focus. By the 10th year of Nick Caserio, we'll have him completely figured out. We could be like an AI machine that predicts exactly what Caserio will do. Next one was, this is Caserio on the difference between how they drafted in New England versus how they draft here, where they traded back a lot in New England with Belichick. It's been a lot different here. Nick will go in either direction.
Bill was always very, I would say, he had a process and approach that we utilized. I would say we were a little bit more inclined to trade back in New England.
Right.
Trading back, and I think the idea is, and I think even Eric DeCosta may have said this previously or recently, it just gives you more opportunities or shots on goal, which is the goal. And the reality is you're not going to hit on every draft pick. Anybody that says that they are, is lying to you. But you just create a little bit more shots on goal. I would say from our perspective, it's knowing the board top to bottom, really knowing the players, understanding the fit, understanding what the potential role is going to be for your team. And it's really about positioning. If you have different groups of players, you have to get into this range probably for this group of players. if you're not in that range, you're probably going to lose out. Then you go to the next group. So it's just knowing the players as much as possible.
Yeah, it's funny with Nick because Nick's a big baseball fan. I think he said right that was his chosen sport, or at least he thought it was going to be, at least at one point in his life. And I feel like with Nick, there's that balance between finding what the math says sometimes versus also just going with your old horse sense and how you feel about things. And it's a case by case basis, whether they trade up, whether they trade down. But he doesn't want to be locked in to one specific strategy to where they might not be flexible enough. And it is interesting thinking about Caserio when he was in New England, when clearly Nick has a different philosophy about going with the draft than Bill Belichick did. And Nick will point out that, hey, everybody had a voice in those drafts, but ultimately the guy calling the final shot in Belichick was wired a whole lot differently. So I wonder, everybody's got their little bag of, well, if they'd done it my way, it would have worked out. That's a good question for Nick. Next time Sean and I have him on, what was the little move that they wish they would have made that would have worked out, as long as he also names one that where he's lucky it didn't work out. Wanted to trade up for this guy, but turns out that this guy, I don't know, turns out he had killed 3 drug dealers in Tijuana the week before the draft. Next one is this. You guys can play along with this. Caserio guesses which 3 picks from the last 3 years. There are only 3 picks where the Texans selected a player with the original selection that the Texans had. Every other pick in the last 3 years has been some kind of part of another trade, and it wasn't their original slot. 1, 2, 3, 7 trades, however many it took. So there's only 3 that were actually the Texans' own picks. And as I expected, Nick, who in that flurry of moves on draft day kind of loses track of him. He loses track of which pick came from where more so than we do, because we only know the 1% of his discussions that actually worked out.
23, 24, and 25. All right, so Stroud, okay. I want to say maybe one of the second-round picks in 23.
No, right round, but 24. And 24, you had a second-round pick. Right.
Oh, okay. It would have been Kamari, right?
No,
42.
I think it's Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher, round 2.
Was the original.
The original.
Kamari pick was the Minnesota pick, and then Blake Fisher was our original pick. So, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't even keep track of all the damn trades you did.
No,
I know.
I Believe me, Chris, I can't. The last one, I probably would have no idea.
No, and then it's one that I would never remember.
Probably like a late
anybody.
round pick or something.
It's round 7, right? It was Marcus Harris, exactly.
Marcus Harris. I only knew that. I knew it because I had read something about this actual trivia thing before he came on. The fact that they're stopping production of the penny next year. For those of you who don't know, news alert, this is a news station now. They're not going to produce the penny anymore. I know you're going to cry a million tears over that because it's such a useful denomination. That the 7th round picks that Nick treats them like they're pennies. It's just loose change that he's throwing around in all these deals. I'm kind of surprised that there still was a 7th round pick. Marcus Harris is interesting because I think just like they did last year, the Texans are going to keep trying to find defensive linemen, especially when you play an 8-man rotation. Try to find some of these diamonds in the rough that might develop into something. They don't have the ideal size necessarily, but they've got a pass rush ability or explosiveness or something. And I think that's what they did this year as well. So, I'll be watching Marcus Harris to see if that's one of the ones they should have hung on to. As far as the stadium goes, let me get some of these comments here before we move on. We'll get to the stadium. Work is boring. That's right. What's up, fans? And also Memorial Day, obviously. I always there's a tendency to thank the current veterans, which obviously that's relevant, but remembering people who have paid the ultimate sacrifices Memorial Day. Sometimes I think they work better with their pivots than if the original plan had gone through. Well, was it which pick was it that's your pick, Jack? During the COVID draft, when they were trying to do something, didn't go through, Bill O'Brien angrily said, "That's your pick, Jack." And I want to say it ended up being Zach Cunningham, but it seems like the timing might be off on a bit of that. I'll get to Eli Cox in a little bit. So, all right, the stadium. and whether or not the Texans are going to try to find a new stadium or new headquarters. There's one thing I'm sure of at this point. It's the Texans are almost definitely going to be in a new headquarters somewhere outside of the stadium, and probably sometime much sooner than if a new stadium is built or if there's a renovation. But Jonathan Alexander kind of just tied up a bunch of loose ends and wrote an article where he pointed out that Harris County officials very much would like to retain the Texans, have their headquarters built here. If the Texans build their headquarters at NRG Stadium, for instance, or at Energy Park, maybe there's a better chance that the stadium is just going to get a renovation or whatnot. But a few little nuggets from this. Earlier this month, Texans President Mike Toman said building a headquarters at Energy Park where there's significant acreage available is one of the options the team is considering. They're also entertaining other sites outside of Harris County, but within the greater Houston area. The public money and whatever things might come along with it, I don't think it matters as much for the headquarters. Now, if they're going to build like a a retail / restaurant / Texans headquarters, that gets really interesting. And I think that a lot of you're close to a whole bunch of people, but to kind of really glitz that area up with one shopping center, I wonder just how ambitious they would get with it. And obviously, if it's at Energy Park, their options are going to be limited. So I'm wondering, I'm doubtful that it's going to be at Energy Park if they really want a combo retail / headquarters type facility. I am intrigued by what would come with it. Remember Texans Fitness? That was a thing for a while. Maybe they'll end up bringing that back, have a gym or something of some sort. Also in the Alexander article, headquarters would be paid for by the team, but could include tax breaks and other incentives from the county in which it resides. This is where that's where the real talks start, I think, is that there's 11 counties in the greater Houston area, and all it takes is one of those counties offering up a really sweet deal in terms of public money and tax breaks and whatever else like that, to where it might almost become impossible for the Texans to ignore that. I hope they stay at NRG. I don't need a brand spanking new stadium. Whatever renovations are cool. But as a fan, I would like to get in and out of the stadium easier, but that's neither here nor there. I'm a creature of habit. It's more the norm to move out. And when you do that, there's been some teams that have done it recently where they have development around there. And so there are things we are looking at. The first thing, though, is to make sure our players are taken care of so they can win games for our fans. So that's for the players, best for the bottom line. And I guess the other question, too, is on a personal level. If I'm being selfish and I'm the owner of the team and I'm thinking only about myself, I kind of like just driving from River Oaks. They live in River Oaks. I mean, there's just one shot down Kirby to the stadium. That's a lot different than having to commute 45 minutes to an hour out to go to the football team that you own. And is Cal kind of being a guy that grew up here? I think sentiment might tip them towards keeping it at NRG Stadium or like on the sentimental part of it. But the cold hard dollars might end up meaning they go somewhere else. One other thing, the Texans are one of two tenants of the county-owned stadium, along with the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, and must maneuver around those events during the season. The three entities, the Texans, the Rodeo, and the county, are also negotiating a new lease agreement, which is set to expire in 2032. That could decide who has primary control over the stadium. And that's what I wonder if part of it, too, might just be reworking the deal with those other two entities. And I know a lot of times people say, hey, the rodeo is only once a year. What's the big deal? It's not just the rodeo. It's everything going on at the stadium. So it's concerts, it's tractor pulls, it's motocross events. I don't know if they still have the zoo. There's Disney on Ice. So it's a lot. And the Texans are just kind of tenants with rowdy neighbors that get to use the facility for their house parties any weekend at all hours that they want without getting any of the revenue from it. So maybe just in reworking some of the ways some of that's controlled and divvied up ends up being a part of it. This stuff gets way too far into the weeds for the likes of my pitiful brain. I'm hard of thinking, you know. Cal can take a helicopter. That's a good point. It's a very good point. They had one on Beach Nut around the corner from my crib, but it came and went. So that's a comment to somebody else, right? I think if they build a practice facility and headquarters somewhere, they can build a new stadium over the practice fields and parking lots that are there. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of parking lots there. If you got rid of the Astrodome and the old stadium, that would create more parking on the current NRG where all the business is done. I don't. Maybe that's part of this package too. I feel like just so we could stop talking about it during slow news weeks in July, I would love for that to happen. I know a lot of you have sentimental attachments to it. I get it, but we're now in the. Listen, it's just as likely that they tear down the Astrodome as if there's some movement to not tear down NRG Stadium. And we're going to be sitting there with a brand new football stadium on the west side of Kirby with 2 defunct football stadiums over on the east side of Kirby. And we'll just the only thing that'll be accomplished is we'll have twice as many feral cats as we currently do in that ballpark area. Frank Ross, let me see one more of these. Hasn't been torn down for a reason. Yeah, there's the conspiracy. Frankly, I'm a little disappointed in the lack of conspiracy theories about people that might be buried underneath the concrete at the stadium. The one suggestion that I wish they'd take me up on, but I don't think they will, is the Hoffheinz apartment. Judge Hoffheinz had that apartment in the Astrodome, which was badass, man. You talk about living out your boyhood dreams. Like, who amongst us didn't have some weird cockamamie fantasy about living in a stadium? I had a dream when I was a kid that if I ever really made it in the world, I was going to buy my entire junior high school and live in it, because it was kind of shaped almost like a castle. And then I would have ramparts around the outside and all. I'm sure I had all kinds of like maidens in distress worked into this little fantasy. But also, I got called on it because they sold my old junior high school not too long ago. I feel like if I could put together a good business plan for it, I could have created some kind of office space, but then also had a separate wing to myself. Wife wasn't on board with it for multiple reasons. So she's killing my dreams slowly. Frank Ross was on with Mark and John, and I've got a link to the whole episode below. He talks some good in-depth special teams stuff, but I just grabbed a few of the more interesting human side questions. But he talked about, he was asked by Mark Vandermeer how his coaching style, which Mark pointed out is he's very much a teacher, how has that changed over the years, and what is it now?
Question. View myself as a teacher every day, and just the subject material is football. Like, I'm a teacher first. The fun part of my job is to find out how to have 53 different sets of ears that learn differently, getting them on the same page. Great. So my teaching needs to reflect that, and I need to make sure I'm accommodating each different learning style. So to be a good teacher, you got to understand your audience on who is learning in what ways. So big into the demonstrative motions and me getting out and doing the physical. I always make sure, like a little thing I do, if I'm coaching you here, you're looking at me, but I'll turn around and coach this way because this is our right hand, and I want you to see it if you're facing that way.
Yes. That's what keeps me out of aerobics classes. I never know where I'm supposed to mirror the woman or just go like if she goes right foot, I go left foot or not. Going back to when I was 14, somebody tried to talk me into aerobics. I'm like, I don't know what the mirroring situation is with it. I do think that D'Amico and what he expects from his coaches is very much to be a teacher, that coaching is teaching. That's enough. Bill O'Brien has said that. And it's 100% true. But if you ever wonder, hey, why are special teams coaches so hyper? Why are they seemingly all built like Frank Ross? I would say 75% of special teams coaches, if you watch them move around, they're kind of hyper. Those guys have to coach 11 guys at a time with them, just himself and his assistant, and then however the position coaches are kind of helping out and chipping in. Sometimes those guys do more harm than good when they're helping out. And you got to do it in a 10-minute period. Like it's a high energy position. Imagine if you're a teacher and you had 11 minutes to teach algebra to a class before they rolled in a new set of algebra students to learn algebra in 11 minutes. That's kind of their challenge, and they got to break it down on an individual level. That's why they're always usually the most entertaining guys on a team, on a football staff at least. They're wired a little bit differently. Next was Ross he was asked by John, I think, about Woody Marks, a guy like Woody Marks, who probably didn't play a whole bunch of special teams in college, but he's obviously got a lot of special teams potential. How do you go about kind of prospecting those guys and figuring out what their skill set's going to be?
Got to do some digging. Yeah. And you got to do some projection. You got to do some looking at, like, okay, does that movement skill set even though it's on offense or defense, like, does that fit what I'm going to ask him to? What type of tackler are they as a safety? What type of coverage player are they? What do they have instincts and ball skills as a DB? Great. Can he go down a punt as a gunner in the plus 50 territory? So you do some of that, but when you get here, you're a blank slate, and yeah, we're gonna build them with a strong foundation and grow up from there.
Yeah.
It's I'll tell you, because I didn't play a lot of special teams in college at all, and then my rookie year, I'm out there playing kickoff. It was a 305-pound, however heavy I was. In the preseason, I was on kickoff, and I had played special teams a little bit in college, but you get into the NFL, and if you've never played it before, my God, it's tracer bullets all over the place, and they're explaining to you in meetings all the things that could happen to you. Like, you got to keep an eye on the L3 over there, but watch out for the R5. But of course, the wedge is first and foremost the most important thing. Back then, we had a wedge, and it was stressful, man. Luckily, I sucked enough that they didn't put. You try to be 305 pounds running down on kickoff in Florida in August, and then go right out on a defense. Miserable. I was the worst special teams player. Great respect for those guys that can pick it up and be specialists. This is Frank on this interview. I'm guessing was before they voted on the changes to the onside kickoff. So here's him explaining part of it before the vote.
What is it? They're going to move the kickoff team up about one more yard where their front foot is on that yard line. We'll see what the final ruling ends up being after the owners' meetings, and hopefully that gets what everybody's looking for. Keeps the onside kick pure. It allows for an uptick in chance for recovery just because the coverage team is down there one step earlier, so that bang, bang, maybe that ball jars loose a few more times, results in some more recoveries.
Yeah, and they did do that. That was the one more, I guess, under-discussed or under-reported part of changing the onside kickoff rule. You can call for an onside kickoff anywhere in the game now if you're behind, but also they moved where they kick off back to the 34, but the defensive players are allowed to be 1 yard further upfield than before. So the neutral zone there, or the dead zone, is still going to be 10 yards, I would imagine. But theoretically, you're just going to have guys down there to make an impact sooner than later. Because the onside recovery rates with the new formation rules and everything have just been abysmal. So you weren't able to run an onside kick except in obvious situations, and it was very unlikely that it was going to work out at all anyway. So I'm cool with that, like tweaking on the margins like this on the onside kick stuff. We're never going back to the days of old where for the better or worse, it was just 11 guys running down like they're in a medieval battle. Let's see. Isaiah, it does sound like ADHD. I've told you before. Most of in the defensive line room, it's pretty high. I'd say in the defensive line room, I'd say it's maybe, I always say a half. It's probably not a half, but a good chunk of like either diagnosed or undiagnosed ADHD. It just serves that position well. It's very good for us to just be just kind of wide-eyed and get after it. Even if you're smart, you still want to have a little bit of that short attention span. Special teams coaches, I would agree with it, other than that it's also an incredible organizational task. But as those of you with ADHD know, if you are obsessed with something, that people with ADHD is a superpower. So most of the special teams coaches are also super obsessed with it, and they can go on those binges where they can work 12 hours of drawing things up and everything. So yeah, ADHD is still a superpower for special teams coaches, I'd say. Yeah, the Saints, and that's the one, the Saints versus the Colts in the Super Bowl at halftime. The fact that you have to announce it now, it just, even if it's more likely, I think it's going to be less of an ambush than when you just roll out there and line up in it. What the F were the Lions proposing that seating rule? I was cool with the I don't know. I gotta, what are the counter arguments to the reseeding of the playoffs and not having home field advantage just because you're one in your division? I know it would have benefited the Texans a bunch of times, and people will point out the times where, the Texans wouldn't have had a home game because of this or that. In some of those instances, the Texans specifically didn't play their starters. So you can't go back in time and say, well, because the Texans lost, they wouldn't have had a home game. That last game of the season becomes a lot more meaningful. Last year, the Texans would have had an incentive to play their starters in that Titans game at the end of the year. With the injury situation, I get it. I'm a purist on this. I want every game to matter as much as possible. All right. Oh, it's almost time to go. I'm going to cut it off. Like, subscribe. I'll do a couple of members videos this weekend early. I know I've been lax on that this week, but it's so damn slow, everybody. It's just so damn slow.